Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Hasnan Abbas yet again from Pakistan Society for Training and Development. It's a learning and development company, has pioneered for the last more than 5 decades now. So I welcome all of you on Facebook and multiple other platforms, live and exclusive. So I hope you're all doing well. Back to business. The COVID is almost over, but we are learning to live with the new normal. As part of the series of programs that we do live, we always have consultants, trainers, and subject matter experts who come in, share their opinions, experiences, and that's where we learn from. Today, the topic that we've chosen to speak on is, I believe, need of the hour. It's like they say, 2020 in the recent decades have been one of the most serious and difficult years. So we decided to go on for a topic that we call as from equilibrium to trepidation. I'd like to introduce Rob Hoblin, who's our guest for the day. He's the director of training at Carmdale, and to know more about his profile and the suitability of the presence of Rob today in our program, I'd like to welcome Rob. Rob.
Thanks very much, Hasnain. Good evening, everybody that's listening in, or good morning, or wherever you are in the world. I know the main majority of you are in Pakistan. Just to let you know my background, a bit of a clue behind me here. I was in the UK police in a national force for just over 30 years, and lots of training, lots of development in the area of crisis, emergencies, incidents, you name it. That's the kind of life I led for about 30 years. I left policing just over 6 years ago. I have since then traveled all over the world delivering training, some of it crisis management, some of it leadership. And for me, those two things do go together. And I'm really happy to be here, saying thank you very much for the invite, and really happy to share my knowledge and my experience in the world of crisis and large scale emergencies. And where I can, obviously, hope I can learn something from what's going on in Pakistan itself as well.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot, Rob. Thank you for making it to the program here today. Let's talk from the very beginning. Rob, why did you choose this topic? Why equilibrium to trepidation? What does it mean?
Yeah, interesting and really good question, Hasnain. The equilibrium is what I call working in normality. We're all in equilibrium until something goes wrong. We're happy, we go to work, we do what we always do. We probably get the same outcomes or similar outcomes on a daily basis, weekly basis. All is fine. Everybody is happy because we are in equilibrium. Then we have an incident. We have either a small scale incident we can deal with in the workplace. It could be larger. It could be extensive. It could be global, COVID-19 being the global one. And then we've got panic. Then we've got trepidation. People are worried. They're worried for many, many different reasons. They may be worried about their own health and well-being. They may be worried about their family's health and well-being, but they also may be worried about their business, their workplace. Have I got a job to go to? Am I going to get made redundant? Who is safe and who is not safe? And I don't just mean physically safe, but financially safe as well. So all those different things give you what I call trepidation. So we move from equilibrium and something happens, something scary happens. And then we go to this period of trepidation.
Okay. So for this period of trepidation, the outcome is trepidation. But in the beginning, Rob, I'd like to ask you why you, being a security person, choose to go for a topic like crisis management. Why did you want to specialize in this? Why crisis management today?
Yeah, for today, I think it's very topical, Hasnain. It's a very topical subject, but I was brought up through policing to plan and exercise for crisis. And that's the whole thing, as you and I spoke with before we started here. For me, dealing with a crisis or an emergency, and we've got to be careful with language here. So just talk about crisis itself. A crisis, its true terminology is it's a unknown, unplanned for event. So bear in mind, it's unknown, unplanned for. Most emergencies, we know what it could be, so we plan for it. So I think sometimes people get the language mixed up. So we tend to be dealing with emergencies. Crisis is something unknown. My background is dealing with terrorism, international terrorism and national terrorism. Now, we know that might happen. That's not a crisis. We don't know what scale it's going to be, so we still plan for it. So that's an emergency. So just go back to your question, Hasnain, why did I choose it? It's because I've been brought up on it. I've been brought up on it on a day-to-day basis in my policing world. We've had to deal with large-scale emergencies. We have had to deal with crisis sometimes. There are some things that have happened. We didn't know it was going to happen. We didn't have it in our emergency plans. So therefore, we then have to deal with it. I suspect some organizations did not plan, did not foresee COVID-19 coming. We in the UK, as you know, we planned for bird flu. We planned for this bird flu that would kill people. And we planned for up to kind of 50% loss of life. So we were planning that 15 years ago. But what we hadn't planned for was COVID, which is killing people, but not in the same way that we planned for with bird flu. So that's why I've chosen the topic. It's something that I've been dealing with all through my policing career. I've trained a lot of it in the last 6 years. I've trained in the crisis management world all over the world as well, particularly in the Middle East, funnily enough. That's where there's been a high demand for crisis management. But I always caveat the word crisis, because for me, a lot of it is large-scale emergencies. It's things we know could happen, but we might not have taken the effort to put in the risk analysis to start with.
While I was looking at this topic and studying and preparing for this meeting, I came up with a couple of crises that we as mankind, the humans, Homo sapiens, have been through. For example, the first one was back in 536 AD. It was a sandstorm. It was initially a mystery for most of us. It took place, and you know how long it went for? It went for more than a year throughout the globe. There was massive, the temperatures went down. There was no sunlight, resulting in deforestation, hence all the famine that the mankind experienced. That was one crisis that's there, as history suggests. Later on, the really recent one was the Spanish flu in the 1918. People were not ready for it. It was a global pandemic. The report suggests that ranging from 40 to 70 million people got impacted and then died as a result of the pandemic. Not so far, 9/11, I believe, also was one of those incidents that people, the United States and the entire global economy was not prepared for. It was something that happened, and then we ended up being in a state of war. Almost half of the world was in a bad situation, resulting in a really bad economic shape. And at last but not the least was the COVID-19. It started almost 8 months ago in some part of the world, and here we are talking about crisis.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree with you. We really need to define the term crisis itself. Moving on, Rob, the sort of experience that you've had is ground zero. You've been a war veteran also. You've fought wars. You've seen it hands-on. Can you please help us connect your experience with how is it useful? Because the audience for us is the corporates, the business owners. How can we connect businesses with the actual situation? How can we learn from you?
Yeah, I think we can learn from the military. My experience in the war, just in case people looking at me thinking, Rob's far too young to be in the war. When I was 18 years old, I was in the Falklands War, just south of Argentina. And I was there, and we're thinking, what am I doing 8,000 miles away from the UK in a war, in the middle of water with very, very cold, very small island? What are we doing here? And the thing for the military is, and this is all military, including Pakistan's military, this military plan, and they plan, and they plan. They exercise, exercise, exercise. And if there's one message I would like everybody to take away today, In terms of a crisis, in terms of a large-scale emergency, you have to have a contingency plan in place first. So it's the preparation part of it. The contingency plan must include training. All of our militaries, whether it's UK military, whether it's Pakistan military or US, wherever in the world, mainly what they do on a weekly basis is they train. They train for foreseen events. They train and they practice. And I think in the corporate world, we perhaps, and I'm saying this collectively because I count the UK in this as well, we get on with our corporate business in the hope that this disaster, this emergency, this crisis will never, ever happen. And when it does happen, because we haven't planned for it, because we haven't trained for it, we go into trepidation and we go into, I used the phrase earlier with Hasnain, we call it headless chickens. It's like you cut the head off the chickens and all the chickens are running around headless. And that's what happens at all the levels in the organization because nobody has planned in the right way. Nobody has done any risk analysis in the right way. And if they've done those two things, that's fantastic. What they still haven't done is trained all of the staff, everybody, from the person who sweeps the corridor to the chief executive who makes the decisions behind the big posh desk on the 20th floor. How many of those can hand on heart say, we trained for it, we practiced for it, we've got lessons learned from it. So if it does happen, we are going to be in a good place because we've practiced for it and we've trained for it.
Thank you. Thank you. So Rob, as a subject matter expert, how do you dissect crisis moving on forward? How do we learn how to cope up with crisis?
I would say,
what are the tools and techniques that you suggest?
I would say some of the tools, there are many tools that can help us. I would say the very first tool that we could use is a risk analysis. We have to have a risk analysis of, I would suggest, what would be the top 20 things that will impact on our business? What top 20 things could happen that will stop us from operating in the normal way, in the equilibrium? What can come and impact our equilibrium to the extent where we might stop, we might have to change direction, any of these things. And not for the executive suite to make this decision. Ask everybody in the organization. Get feedback from everyone. Because there'll be one person in your organization that might think up something, a bit like the Twin Towers in New York. Somebody will think, well, that could happen, or something similar could happen. No, don't be silly. That will never, ever happen. Likelihood. We need to think about the top 20 things, the risks. Once we've agreed, here are our top 20 risks, okay, then let's do some analysis on those risks. Let's do a impact on the business. And once we know what the impact is, what's the likelihood? Is it highly likely, medium likely? Never in 100 years is this going to happen. So we do that and we get some analysis and we have a risk matrix. And then we have what we call risk appetite. What does that mean? What risks are we happy to accept? Once we know what we can accept, and they're usually lower end likelihood versus impact, then we say, right, roundabout in the UK, we use a 5x5 matrix. So the top worst risk ever is going to be 25 points. We'll say roundabout the 15-point mark, 15 to 25. We don't want those risks. It's too heavy. So we have to then have a risk mitigation plan, control measures. So we then draw up a risk mitigation plan with control measures. We put what those control measures are, and then from there we reduce the scoring. So without go, all right, most of our risks are now 15 or below. We can live with those. So that's great. So we have this risk matrix and risk mitigation plan. We also need to put in place alongside a contingency plan. So the contingency plan will tell us what we do if X, Y, Z happens. Great stuff. But then the event happens. Oh my goodness, the likelihood it was going to be 50 years, but it happened yesterday, or it happened tomorrow. Then we go into this, okay, now we need our crisis management plan, CMP. We then, because we've got the crisis management plan, other people might use the language as named business continuity plan. More or less the same thing. Doesn't matter. Business continuity plan, crisis management plan. Predominantly, we use the term business continuity plan here in the UK. So what kind of things might go in that business continuity plan? That's what we've got to think about. And each organization, each industry might be slightly different. But the crucial thing is, what do we need to do to keep our equilibrium? Who do we need? What staff do we need? And just the staff alone, most organizations say, yeah, we know all the staff, we know the contact numbers, and we know where they live, so we know how to call them out. Then it all sits on a virtual shelf, I should say now. Nobody ever tests it. So when we go and do the call out list from the plan that was put together 3 years ago, half the staff have retired. Their names and their phone numbers are still on the business continuity list because nobody's tested it. So again, if we've got a business continuity plan, test it, test it, test it. I would say at least once a year. Test your business continuity plan. Is it up to speed? Will it do what it says on the tin? Will it keep our equilibrium if these things happen? And COVID-19 has really tested many organizations' business continuity plans, big time. Because as we know, I'm not sure what it's like in Pakistan, but in the UK, something like 60% of people started to work from home. Sounds good, brilliant. We're working from home, but we haven't got decent laptops. We don't have decent connectivity. We've got really rubbish broadband. We've lost all the customers' details because they're in the office. We can't go back to the office. They should have been on a electronic platform for ease of access. So again, we need to test the business continuity plan out. That's absolutely crucial. Gone on a bit there, Hassan. I don't want to give too much information too soon. Hopefully I've answered your question.
Yes, you have. But that's just, I believe that's just one bit of it because as an HR person, yes, I agree with you that there's needs a lot of training needs to be done, and we always need to have a plan and prepare and keep testing the business continuity plan every year, at least once every year, so that we are updated and things are changing, so we need to be ready for that. But that's the proactive approach. That's the approach of being ready, the readiness approach.
Yeah.
For example, the COVID-19. What about, yes, the COVID-19 is a really good example. COVID happened. I did not have a BCP in place. The business continuity plan, it was not there in place. What do I do now?
I would say you panic. I would say you go into trepidation. And I would say many of the organizations, for instance, I can quote UK, have now gone out of business. And the reason they've gone out of business is they didn't have a business continuity plan. They never foresaw the event, and they did not have any idea, exactly as you've just said, Hasnain, how to get over it. So let's just say we are in that position. We didn't have a business continuity plan. We never exercised. We never tested. You are now in this cross-fingered hope area. You're hoping you can get through it. Certainly in the UK, we've got government assistance. There may be within certain industries, there is help from within the industry, certain functions. Certainly in the UK, we've got different help availability at different levels, at county level, at regional level, and at government level as well. So, for instance, our government put lots of money forward to allow firms to get staff to what they call furlough. So they didn't work. They were still paid for staying at home whilst they're still trying to get their heads around how do we get people out of furlough and back into business again. Sadly, many of those furloughed people are now redundant or going to be made redundant because the business didn't do its due diligence, if I can use that language, in advance of this COVID-19 happening. It's happening in the training world, as you know, Hasnain. Many of us in the training world, we were getting paid good money for going into locations and delivering classroom training. All of a sudden, classroom training in the UK and across the world stopped. We can't go into a classroom. There's nobody in the classroom. Panic, panic, panic. We didn't plan for it. We didn't practice it. Some were very clever and were already doing Zoom training, Teams training, this kind of platform training. And guess what? They were ahead of the game. They survived very quickly. Many training organizations have gone bust. They didn't know how to react in this particular scenario. Slowly but surely, some organizations have survived, mainly through collaboration and helping each other. Right, you've survived. What can you share with us in terms of your survivability? How did you do it? Who did you contact? I may need some more funding. I may need to get my staff trained differently to do the function in a different way. So there's lots of different answers to your question, but Hasnain, about now that it's happened, we're in panic, we're in trepidation. I think the biggest thing about going into panic is we should breathe slowly, not panic, not flail around with hands going everywhere. As an organization, take stock. Just take stock. Okay, where are we now? How did we end up here? Don't worry about how you got there. You cannot change it. Focus on the future. There's a really good phrase came out from Colin Powell, the ex-Secretary of State for the US, and he was talking to 5,000 people in Colgate College, and he uses the car as an analogy. And I would use this for an analogy to answer this question. In a car, we cannot control what we've seen in the wing mirrors because that's past. It's a microsecond, but we've just passed it. We look in the mirror out the back window. You cannot change what you've just seen. It's past. It's the same with what's happened with business. We are where we are. There's no point in doing lots of meetings about how did we get here. It's too late. Where we have control in the car is the steering wheel. We've got our foot on the pedal, fast or slow, and we can see through the front windscreen. We steer the car in the direction that we wish to go. If you wish to steer into a tree, good luck to you. You're not going to get very far. But if you want to take the right road with your car to get your organization to where it needs to be, you might do it slowly to start with and then pick up speed. But Colin Powell says, you are in charge of your destiny, nobody else. As an organization, you as the chief exec and your C-suite team, you are controlling your car. So focus on the future. Learn from others who have adapted and have gone through this phase of unpredictability. Hope that answers your question, Hasnain.
Yes. Rob, thank you for that. You really have answered my question. What an analogy of the car. Really, I can relate to it. There's this word for businesses, organizations, due diligence. Yes, generally speaking, the organizations, businesses should do their due diligence and practice and train. But you, as a professional consultant and a trainer, who do you think, Rob, is your primary audience for a program like crisis management?
Well, that's a really good question. I can tell you who my audiences have been, if that helps. My audiences have been people who are maybe in charge of health and safety, people who are in charge of operations, people who are in charge of the organization, so the chief execs, or certainly mainly people from the kind of the C-suite level. So that kind of a level, not necessarily mid-managers or first-line managers, mainly mid-managers in terms of the strategic stuff. But then I've also worked with first-line managers, middle managers in terms of the operational and the tactical side of dealing with crisis. So I would say it's contextual. We talk in the policing world, Hasnain, of what we call gold, silver, and bronze. Gold level is the strategic level. That's where the strategy is set and everybody else has to kind of meet the strategic goals. Then we have what we call the silver level, where the tactics are set. The tactics, in order to deal with this crisis or this emergency, to meet the strategic objectives. And then first line managers and what I call operatives at the bronze level, they get on with the operations. So operational delivery to meet those tactics and to achieve the strategic goals. Now that works in industry just as it works in emergency services as well. You can take that methodology and work it anywhere. So I would say it depends. Is it strategy that we're trying to train in, Are we trying to train in tactical options, or are we trying to train in what I call operational front end, really in the mix of it and dealing with the here and the now and actually meeting those tactical and strategic objectives?
Yes, I agree with you there. The plans, once are in place, need to be trickled down. But the term crisis, as we defined it, is, I believe, the ultimate test of people at leadership positions. Don't you think so?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because I'll go back to my definition at the beginning here, Hussein. When we're talking about crisis, it's an unknown, unplanned for event, unforeseen. So this is like a meteoroid has just hit Karachi. How many people have put in their business continuity plan and risk analysis that a meteoroid is going to come out the sky and bump into Karachi or London? That's not, I don't think, in anybody's plan. Why? Because it's very, very unlikely. We would know a good time in advance if something's coming towards Earth, as an example. So the whole point about it is it's unknown, unforeseen, unplanned for, so we're not ready. We are unprepared. So the things that we do know and we can foresee, that's what should be in our plans. So to come across a crisis really has to be very, 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 very limited and very, very unknown, I would argue.
So do you think, you as a consultant, do you think that you can deliver a capacity building program for people at leadership positions and so on and so forth? What are the things that you recommend to be covered in such a program?
Yeah, again, Hassan, I think it's contextual. It's a really good question. I think it's contextual. It depends whether I'm going to a financial organization, whether I'm going to a factory that builds products, builds something, whether I'm going to a hotel as an example that delivers a service to its clients. Every one of those things is contextual. And I'll wind back nearly half an hour now and I'll say, what are your top 20 risks? Once we know what the top 20 risks are, then we talk about the mitigation. Within the mitigation comes the process of planning. That's where our contingency plans come into play. Now, if our contingency plans are that we need to train with this, we need to perhaps bulk up our physical security, we need to perhaps pen test our IT as an example, we need to do some penetration testing on our IT. All those things will be in part of the mitigation. So it's contextual to whatever it is that you do. If it's what's the risk of sailing around the world single-handedly in a 50-foot yacht, that's going to be those top 20 risks are going to be different. That might be, one of those 20 risks might be, I might get eaten by a shark if I fall overboard. Okay, what stops you getting eaten by a shark if you fall overboard? Not many things, to be honest, other than a spear gun, but that's only one shark. Top risk, don't fall overboard. Yeah, make sure we've got something clipped so we don't ever fall overboard. So that's a different set of risks. So that's why I'm saying it's contextual, but I'm confident from my experience, it doesn't matter, really for me personally, doesn't matter what the business is, it's about asking the right questions. And again, if you recall, Hussein, for me, it's dealing with crisis. Number one thing is communication. Absolutely number one. Doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter where in the world you are, doesn't matter what language you speak. Dealing with crisis, it's all about communication. It's all to do with clarity of communication. It's all to do with speed of communication. And it's all to do with what kind of communication. Are we talking oral? Are we talking written? Are we talking sign language? And within all that, we're talking about our non-verbal communication as well, our body language. Does Rob look like he really is concerned about the bomb that's outside his office? Why is he smiling about the bomb that's outside his office? You know what I mean? Non-verbal communication. So a consultant, a crisis consultant can help any organization as long as the organization can identify its top 20 risks. I'm saying 20, it could be 10, it could be 50, whatever the organization wants to look at. Because there's all these things, when you've put mitigation measures in place, it's all to do with cost. There's always a cost to the contingency plan. Yeah, if you want to put a 6-foot wall, make it a 20-foot wall, 6 foot thick, all around your building to protect you, that's fine. But what's the cost? And then what's the impact for your staff? Oh, we've got to climb up this building and come back down again to get into your building. Well, that's no good. So it's got to be sensible. It's got to be something that's going to work for everybody.
Rob, one last question from my end before we move on to the comments that we're receiving live from Facebook. This part of the world, India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and including China, we call as the emerging giants from Facebook point of view, economy point of view. We have a large number of consumers here in this part of the world. So this is where organizations really want to come and invest.
Yes.
As part of the BCP, what are the major risks that lie here? For example, Pakistan, to be specific, that need to be in order to your set up at the time of setting up your business or doing a BCP exercise?
Well, that's a really good question. I think those risks can come from different places. First of all, you've got what we would call the kind of natural risks. So we'd be thinking that, and you kind of touched on it a little bit here. What we were talking here about flooding, and I was reading recently. I know you've had some terrible flooding. I think it was August this year in Karachi itself. So flooding's not a new thing for Pakistan. So what we're going to think about, okay then, so we're going to get flooding, and the maximum we get is 20-foot floods or 10-foot floods. So where is that within our plans? So if we flood, for instance, in Karachi, can we move the business to Islamabad, as an example? Can we have an office ready to go and kick off within 10 minutes of our office in Karachi being flooded? So we shut it all down, business carries on in Islamabad. That's the kind of thing we need to be putting in place, that we don't worry about the office that's in Karachi. That's underwater. Okay, we knew it might happen. Likelihood probably very small, but it did happen. That's fine. We had that in our contingencies. We've just set up the new office in Islamabad and we're up and running. So that's the kind of thing. So we've got flooding, we've got those severe weather. You mentioned severe weather. We in the UK, we've got things like space weather. And people say, what do we mean by space weather? What's that all about? Space weather can impact anywhere in the world, because what we're talking about here is the satellites. What if every single satellite that's out there in the higher stratosphere went bang into each other because of space weather and we lost all the satellites? First thing is, we would go off air straight away. That's what's going to happen to you and me right now. We have a space weather condition that all the satellites bump into each other. You and me go off air. All the cars start bumping into each other because they're all using sat-nav. That's going off the satellites. People don't think that far ahead. They think, well, that'll never, ever happen. But it could happen. So what's the plan if space weather impacts on our satellites, or if certain satellites drop out of space? We've got poor air quality. I know you've got poor air quality things going on in and around some of your cities as well. We used to get it a lot in London, not so much anymore. But all those things, that means poor air quality. You think, what does that mean for me then? That means our staff cannot get to work. They don't have the facility to work from home. That impacts on our business. How do we get around that? We give them laptops and stuff to work from home. So if we have poor air quality, they'll actually be ready to work at home. Our equilibrium carries on. No trepidation at all. So that's the kind of things in terms of what I would say would be the kind of natural hazards. Then in the UK, we've got a separate risk register for malicious attacks, mainly linked with terrorism, but not always. So we've got attacks on crowded places, and I'm sure that police and military in Pakistan have these issues to deal with as well. So we mitigate that by just ensuring that we put security in place, we put physical security in place, and we put listening devices in there, we put cameras up, all those kind of things. Transportation, attacks on your transport infrastructure. Yeah, what happens if somebody bombs one of your main railway lines and nobody can get in or out of a city to a particular direction? What's the contingency? That's okay. We've got a team that can rebuild a railway line within 24 hours. Might be temporary, but we can do it. That's what I mean by contingency. But we've got something in place ready to go in case that happens. Cyber attacks. Again, Hussein, we were talking about cyber before we came on air. Cyber attacks. Can we shut a platform down and re-establish a new platform instantaneously? If we have a power cut and the whole IT goes down, a generator kicks in and our IT kicks back in again. So how we need to test it though. It's all very well talking about it. Have we got it in place? Have we got those mitigation measures in place? We in the UK, I'm not sure about Pakistan, but we also have a thing called CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. Now, what if we have somebody that puts a dirty bomb together, sets that off? The nearest we've had is the sarin kind of attack in China, in Tokyo, quite a few years ago now. You think that's never going to happen here, but it could happen. What if somebody sets off a noxious gas at Karachi main railway station and everybody starts dropping down like flies? They're dead. Oh, wow, we have to plan for those kind of things. It may happen. Unlikely, but it may happen. And then my last one, if I may, Hussein, just to kind of finish off with this one, we then have things like diseases. So guess what? COVID, #1 now by a long way. I know there's different kind of, there's different bird flu diseases still around in the Middle East as we speak. Major accidents, major incidents, like trains, planes, ships. Yeah, something big happening on one of those. System failures. What else have we got? Yeah, and again, I was reading some stuff. I did my homework on Pakistan. Industrial action. Everybody goes on strike. All industries. Next week, on Monday, we're all going to go on strike for 5 days. That should be in the contingency plan already. It's not a crisis. It's an emergency, which we should have planned for. What if everybody does go on strike? It might mean that managers might have to do the job that non-managers are doing right now. But what's the continuity plan? And then we've got, and we have a lot of this in London, for anybody who's been to London, public disorder, demonstrations. And in the UK, you've got to announce if you're doing a demonstration. You can do it, you've got to announce it in advance. So what happens is you get another faction comes in and disturbs the first faction, and you've got this going on. The police have planned for it already. But all these things can stop your business. If you have a large-scale demonstration outside your business premises and you cannot get staff in or get staff out, that should be in your top 20 risks. An unknown peaceful demonstration that goes to non-peaceful and gets aggressive, and you cannot get staff to or from work. Those kind of things should be in your plans as well. Conscious I've talked a little bit longer there, Hussein, and I hope I've answered that question for you.
Yes, you actually hit the bullseye, and you've successfully answered all our questions. And I believe from all of what you've just taught me and the participants for the program today, I believe it really, correct me if I'm wrong, it really starts with the mindset.
Yeah.
The mindset of learning from the mistakes that we've made in the past.
Yes.
Learning from the sort of based, and we need to now come into a frame of mind where we start to plan again, because a lot of us, most of us business leaders, we realize that we were never prepared.
Yeah.
So
right.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the planning is absolutely crucial. Planning, and it's a good point that you raised, because I haven't really talked much about lessons learned. So we do lots of exercises in the UK, and I'm just being critical of the UK now, not anywhere else. We do lots of planning, we do lots of exercising. Where I think we've got a gap, and quite a big gap from my experience, my personal experience, is we do lots of exercising, but we don't ever capture and then disseminate the lessons that we learn. And there's nothing secretive about it. It's just human nature. So we think, oh, we've done some bad things, so let's not tell anybody else about that because we don't want to be seen in a bad light. For me, we should be open, honest, and transparent, and share the lessons that we learn in our particular industry, whether that's policing, whether it's banking, whether it's finance, whether it's TV, wherever it is. And because it goes back to my point about communication. We are all humans. It just so happens we do different jobs. So what lessons have we learned? How do we incorporate those lessons learned into contingency planning? How do we incorporate those lessons learned into risk and risk mitigation? And how do we all learn from each other? There's many platforms out there, so there's lots of good stuff going on in the background. So we're not in a bad place. And I'll give you one example, and maybe some people listening in from this particular organization is the Institute of Security and Risk Management, which is a really good organization. It's very global, and lots of sharing going on amongst those guys and girls. But that's the security world. What we're saying here is, what about the business world? How are we sharing lessons learned on incidents, emergencies, crisis in the business world? It might be our security leaders, our security directors that are doing that, but they may be insular in just sharing it within their own confines and not sharing it with wider industry. So again, perhaps some gaps there as well that could be filled.
I agree with you there. So we start off with writing down and sharing, and hence learning from mistakes, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Great, Rob. Thank you so much for making time for this meeting, presentation, a webinar. We've been live for 41 minutes now. I believe we've covered most of what needs to be discussed about crisis, about emergencies, terms specifically. We've also tried our level best to connect and learn from your experience and how we can relate and transfer it to the business world, which is our audience for today. So I really thank you very much indeed, Rob, for sharing your experience with us. This video will be there, available on our Facebook page. For all those listening live, you can refer to the people and ask them to come and visit the page later on and look at the video and learn from it. And you can also get in touch with us on the platform Pakistan Society for Training and Development to get in touch with Rob and explore opportunities to partner on be it some consulting assignment, or if we can line up a training program and multiply and learn again.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely that, Hossein. Yeah. If I could just maybe, I like to always think of things in threes. If I may just finish with three things, make sure you do your risk analysis, make sure you do your contingency planning, and make sure you exercise. Would be my three top tips if you want to be prepared for a crisis or serious incident.
Right. You are very, very useful. I think I'll note them down and we'll also post it on our page while the video is there. So thanks again, Rob. Thank you so much for your presence. I really like to thank the team that is Shazib supporting us for these webinars from my team from PSCD. So thank you, participants, the viewers of the page today. Thanks a lot. Have a good evening and weekend.
Thanks very much, Hussein. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Allah Hafiz.